You know that one airline that just feels iconic? For me, that's Cathay Pacific Airways. I've always associated this airline as being the symbol of both the golden age of flying and Hong Kong. Now, around the time Hong Kong was cementing itself as the pulsating heart of Asia, Cathay Pacific was at the forefront of this story. This was when Cathay Pacific and Hong Kong went hand in hand, being synonymous with sophistication, prestige, and a gateway to the East. But that was a while ago.
Like the days of yore, you know?
It's 2025 now, and does this really mean anything? I finally got the chance to experience the long-haul economy class product of Cathay Pacic's 777-300ER from Hong Kong to Melbourne. And yes, while the 777 remains a workhorse in their fleet, it's definitely not a brand new aircraft. But you see, flying between Asia and Australia is becoming a battlefield. Everybody and their nan wants a piece of the pie. This market is inundated with premium perks, competitive pricing, and sometimes even budget fares, all in a bid to try and outdo the other. So is Cathay still a premium experience, or has it fallen into the same trap as so many other legacy carriers, riding on reputation rather than reality? More importantly, should you fly Cathay Pacific for your next long-haul flight? Let's find out. Welcome to Hong Kong Central Station. Any journey with Cathay Pacific should, or well, technically could, start here. They offer a neat little perk where you can drop off your bags before getting on the train, saving you from lugging them around. A great concept, except today it didn't quite work. Now referred to as the in-town check-in procedure, it's designed to ease bag drop for people who rely on public transport to get to the airport. But either I was too early or the universe just decided I needed a little extra struggle this morning. Now a ride to the airport, which will pass through Kowloon, will cost you about 115 Hong Kong dollars, with a duration coming in at just under 30 minutes. Arriving at Hong Kong International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, handling over a whopping 71.5 million passengers annually, I was greeted with that universal language of people sprinting to catch their morning departures. You know, that part dawn airport experience / part sleep deprivation with just a hint of existential dread. Cathay Pacific, however, is a beacon of efficiency, getting things right every single time. I wasn't even in line, just fumbling for my passport, and a Cathay Pacific agent just materialized out of nowhere and asked me where I was flying to. Melbourne, I replied, and somehow within 30 seconds I had my boarding passes and was ushered towards the bag drop. All formalities completed in under 5 minutes, easily. Now, Hong Kong Airport has one of the best viewing decks in the world, a paradise for AvGeeks and people who enjoy those multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment defy gravity every single day, and you best believe that's where we're headed. Alrighty guys, let's go get some food. So I think if you want food, you've got to go up this level where they keep food on a separate concourse, I think. Now, I don't quite know what constitutes to a traditional Hong Kong breakfast, so I got this bowl of fried chicken with noodles, and I promise you, easily the most goated meal that I had here. Now, my departure gate was kind of far from where I was, but not to worry, because Hong Kong Airport's got an efficient train system to interlink between all various concourses. Internal trains, pods for you to do your work, reliable Wi-Fi, a multitude of eating and duty-free outlets. It's all very impressive. And if you didn't have time to visit the Skybridge, since the airport has large floor-to-ceiling windows, you can pretty much plane spot at most parts of the airside. Now, the boarding gate was initially empty, but soon that was very much not to be the case. This morning's flight will be operated by a Boeing 777-300ER, which will be packed to the brim. And shout out to the agent who looked me in the eye and said the flight wasn't that full. Many of the folks from today's flight will join us from Japan, mainland China, and India, with only a handful of us originating from Hong Kong. But this plane shouldn't be any stranger to the task at hand, simply because I've been having a look at the flight history for Bravo-Kilo Quebec Whiskey. It's only been doing Melbourne to Hong Kong consecutively. It's been doing that route for the last couple of days, and in fact it's just come in from the red eye from Melbourne and it's heading back to Melbourne again on the same day, so it hasn't done a different route in some time. It's quite funny actually. I like that the departure board displays the weather details of your destination, which certainly creates some excitement for where you're headed, and boarding in Hong Kong is vastly efficient. But I absolutely need to talk about the facial recognition feature. No passport and no boarding pass required. Just stand in front of the camera and the system spits out your details and seat. Bro, these guys living in 3025 for real. Now first of all, when you board your flight, you're greeted by that really warm and accommodating quintessential Asian greeting. Now I want to preface everything that happens from now on by saying that these economy class cabins are usually laid out in a 3-all configuration, except for my row that had a 2, 3 and nothing layout. Our seat this morning is 39 Alpha, the forwardmost seat that features extra legroom, standard seat features, personalized air conditioning vents, and the universal power outlets. Now it's not that these seats are of low quality, but they certainly start to show their age. Back during their prime, I'd imagine that they were state-of-the-art planes, but I guess since then the product has somewhat dated. But this particular seat had one very annoying defect that would absolutely infuriate the passenger behind me, which I only discovered after it was a little too late, and you're going to have to keep watching to find out. And speaking of, the passenger seated behind me had apparently paid for an extra legroom seat, much like I did, but hadn't been given one. So they had an absolute meltdown, summoning the gate agents on board who couldn't seem to figure out what was going on either. Now this held up for some time, but eventually the guests realized that they were fighting a losing battle and just decided to accept their fate. Now I really don't know what happened, but if this was really the case, I'd be fuming. Not only because I constantly choose the more expensive seats myself, but because I know for a fact how much more expensive these seats cost than a standard seat. And couple this with the fact that Hong Kong to Melbourne is a long haul flight, if you chose your seats, you'd probably expect to get what you paid for. Now we really had to get out of Hong Kong ASAP because the sky was brewing an absolute storm, and the last thing I wanted was to get held up in Hong Kong. As the plane was ascending, I noticed my seat very involuntarily start reclining, and I tried tugging it forward several times, but to very little avail. I was well aware that this was making the lady behind me very uncomfortable because she shoved my seat forward twice before leaning into her husband and saying something vaguely along the lines of, "They just don't understand, do they?" Halfway through the flight, I did eventually meet her in the galley and explain the situation to her, and she apologized for it, so no harm, no foul. But the whole time this was happening, I kept thinking about this other Cathay incident that happened only a few months before this flight. Now fortunately it never got to that, and the lady was actually quite understanding once I explained what was going on. As far as the in-flight entertainment went, the selection was decent, a few new releases as well as some classics, and available in quite a few languages too. Now the headphones were nothing crazy, but you don't really get a whole lot more in economy class, so try and bring your own headphones if possible. I want to be very unequivocally clear here. I will take this opinion to my grave. This airline is very good at a lot of things, but one thing in particular stands out. Their economy class catering. It's not just about the food, it's the experience. The fact that they hand out a menu, the fact that the menu is printed in 2 languages, the fact that they outline the dietaries very visibly. It's all done with so much pride. They really make it a whole experience. We start off with a beverage run, and thankfully Coke Zero was available today, served alongside some peanuts. They then rolled out the main meal about an hour later. Now the entree was quite good and the potatoes were certainly cooked to perfection, but when it came to the main course, I should probably preface this by saying that I don't really eat pork or even touch pork for that matter. But given that the option that I actually wanted didn't have any meat in it and the braised chicken just seemed a little bit too whitewashed for me, I didn't really have much of a choice. I just had to settle for pork this morning. My word, it actually tasted exceptionally good. The whole meal was not only presented in style, but it was just packed with flavor, nutrients, and just tasted phenomenal. When it comes to dessert, I don't care if you say Häagen-Dazs or Häagen-Dazs or however you pronounce it, but the fact that an airline would offer this in economy class amazes me. And I don't know if as an Australian I've somehow conditioned my mind into thinking that the bare minimum is sometimes just good enough, but every time I'm on one of these flights I remember that the standard is actually poles apart. And just FYI, this has nothing to do with the Qantas long-haul product, as I'm invariably sure a lot of Qantas enthusiasts will have something to say about that in the comments section. Now, as far as facilities went, Cathay was once again winning points, not because the loos were state-of-the-art or anything, but rather because the loos were consistently cleaned by the crew. They're average sized for what you can expect on a 777, with hand wash, hand cream, clean and full-length mirrors available. Now, Cathay Pacific's history is a roller coaster of ambition, drama, and occasional chaos. It was actually founded in 1946 by two expat pilots who were living in Hong Kong with a single DC-3 named Betsy, and it kind of grew from a scrappy startup into one of the world's most prestigious airlines. And by the 20th century, it was the epitome of premium service, pioneering ultra-long-haul routes and setting the gold standard for Asian carriers. But of course, no airline rises without turbulence, and political tensions with China escalated after the 2019 Hong Kong protests, forcing out top executives in what can only be described as a corporate purge, and of course the adverse ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic. And through it all, Cathay has somehow managed to claw its way back up, revamping its premium service and doubling down on ultra-long-haul ambitions. Now, along the way, it's had some spelling mistakes on jets, first-class tickets mistakenly sold for economy prices, and one very not safe for work cockpit scandal. But hey, every airline has its battle scars. Cathay's just happened to be a little bit more entertaining. Now, on a side note, January was without a doubt one of the hardest and most emotionally taxing months of my life. These flights were actually initially booked because my dog wasn't feeling too well, so I wanted to fly back to see him one last time, but sadly I didn't quite make it in time and he passed away before I flew to Colombo. And then literally a week later, one of my first ever friends in Tassie lost his battle with cancer. And with everything seemingly just weighing down at once, I found myself questioning whether I even had the energy to keep doing this. But strangely enough, I'll always remember these Cathay Pacific flights as some form of escapism from what was going on 38,000 feet beneath me. But that being said, as the flight was drawing me closer to home, the lights slowly came back on for dinner. So for the entree, we got seasonal fresh fruit, bread and butter. Now look, I can't say that I've ever thought of fruit as being an entree. Like, is this something people do? I'm genuinely curious. But the fruit in itself was actually okay. For the main course, we had stir-fried chicken in black bean sauce. Once again, drawing some flavors from the Orient, it was actually the choice I was happy to go with. It was really tasty with very succulent pieces of diced up chicken breast that had been simmered in black bean sauce, served with steamed vegetables. Very healthy and once again probably fit for a gym bros meal plan. Might be something I need to adopt when cutting season comes around the corner. Might flick Cathay an email asking for the recipe. Now for dessert, we had mango and pistachio pudding. Personally, not a fan of either of those things, but when put together, it did taste marvelous. Now in terms of customer service, these guys really had a full flight load to work with, but were very patiently and proactively tending to all requests. Everything was done with a very visible head nod and a smile right before they undertook whatever task was assigned to them. One such example is I drank about 3 Hong Kong milk teas on this flight because this stuff is actually addictive. Now unfortunately, they kept the seatbelt sign on for most of the jaunt across Australia. So when I asked for my next cup, she diligently wrote it down and she said she'd bring it when the seatbelt sign was off, and like half an hour later when it actually went off, she brought it almost instantly.
Weather is nice today with a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius and landing normally runway 34. According to the computer, we should be landing around 23:32 local time in Melbourne, and in 5 minutes we should be at the bay, which is about half an hour late on the schedule. We do apologize for this delay. However, we do hope that you had a very pleasant final company. Happy to see you. Thank you very much for your attention. Cabin crew, landing 30 minutes. Thank you.
Alright, so is Cathay Pacific Airways worth it? For the budget-conscious traveler, Cathay Pacific's competitive fares present a compelling proposition. Whether you're journeying along my route or venturing to Europe, there's undoubtedly a fare for your itinerary. In terms of the overall experience, the in-flight catering is of an exceptional standard. Cabin service is both efficient and exudes a polished cordiality, and Hong Kong International Airport functions as a meticulously designed hub with Cathay at its nucleus. Now, the only discernible shortcoming on this flight stemmed not from the 777 itself, but from this specific aircraft. Its involuntary involuntary seat recline could potentially pose a safety risk during critical phases of the flight. Nevertheless, this appears to be a straightforward fix. Let's delve into the final score for today's flight. Cathay Pacific doing outstandingly well today with the top score for the check-in formalities. If you appreciate my content, feel free to subscribe and tap the bell button icon for seamless access to future uploads. Share your flight experiences in the comments, I always enjoy reading them. You can also follow my work on TikTok and Instagram. That's all for now, wishing you a fantastic day and as always, safe travels.